You're at your own birthday celebration, surrounded by loved ones, when suddenly your world gets turned upside down. What would you do if your sister stood up and announced she was carrying your husband's child? Well, what happened next will absolutely blow your mind. I'm about to share a story that proves sometimes the quietest people pack the biggest punch. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from, because this tale of revenge is going to leave you speechless. So here's what went down. There I was, Sarah, 32 years old, sitting in this fancy restaurant called the Crystal Lounge. It was supposed to be my special day, you know. All my friends and family were there, everyone dressed up, the whole 9 yards. But then my sister Hannah decided to drop a bombshell that would change everything. She stood up, placed her hand on her barely visible belly, and with the biggest smirk you've ever seen, announced to the entire room that she was expecting. But here's the kicker. She made it crystal clear that my husband David was the father. Can you imagine? At my own birthday dinner. The whole restaurant went dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. Everyone's eyes were on me, waiting to see if I'd break down crying or cause a massive scene. That's what they expected from me, right? The emotional sister who always fell apart when things got tough. But something interesting happened instead. I just sat there, completely calm, took a slow sip of my red wine, and smiled. Not a fake smile, but a real one. Because what they didn't know was that I'd been expecting this moment for weeks. Let me take you back to how this all started. Growing up, I was always the responsible one in the family. While Hannah got everything handed to her on a silver platter, I had to work for every single thing. When she wanted that expensive designer dress for her graduation, our parents emptied their savings. When I needed help buying textbooks for my advanced courses, they told me to get a job. I became the family's problem solver, the reliable one who kept everything together. But here's the thing about being the steady person in everyone's life. They start taking you for granted. They mistake your strength for weakness, your silence for submission. That was their biggest mistake. About 6 weeks before that birthday dinner, I accidentally stumbled upon something that changed everything. I was trying to look up a recipe on our shared tablet when I saw an email notification. It was from Hannah to David, and the subject line just said, "The strategy." My heart started racing. I knew I shouldn't open it, but I had to know. What I found inside made my blood run cold. It wasn't just about their affair, it was a detailed plan to humiliate me publicly at my birthday dinner. They wanted to force me into a quick, messy divorce where they could take everything. Hannah had written, "She'll be too devastated to fight back. She never stands up for herself anyway." Reading those words felt like getting punched in the stomach. I dropped the tablet and it cracked on the kitchen floor, just like my heart was cracking in that moment. I locked myself in the bathroom and had one moment of complete breakdown, just one. I opened my mouth and let out this silent scream of pain as my entire world crumbled around me. But after that single moment of weakness, something shifted inside me. The hurt transformed into something much more dangerous, pure, calculated determination. I called my best friend Rachel immediately. "Rach," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "it's time. I'm not going to fall apart this time. I'm going to make them pay." But here's where the story gets really interesting. As I started connecting the dots, I realized the affair was just the tip of the iceberg. The real betrayal went much deeper than I ever imagined. You see, David and I had been trying to have a baby for years. It was my biggest dream, and after months of begging, he finally agreed to get tested for fertility issues. He went to the Riverside Medical Center alone and came back with devastating news. He held me while I cried that night, stroking my hair and telling me it wasn't my fault. "The doctor said I'm perfectly fine," he whispered, his voice full of fake sympathy. "It must be you, sweetheart. I'm so sorry." I carried that burden for an entire year. I believed I was broken, that I was the reason we couldn't have children. The guilt was eating me alive, but now I realized his lie was about to become his downfall. I called Rachel back a few days later. I need the real test results from Riverside Medical Center, I told her. Rachel worked as a legal assistant, so she knew how to navigate these things. That's protected medical information, she said. It's like trying to break into Fort Knox. I'm his wife, I replied, my voice hard as steel. There has to be a way. And there was. After 2 weeks of phone calls, forged consent forms, and some creative detective work, we got those results. When that email landed in my inbox, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely click the mouse. The report was brutal in its simplicity. Patient shows complete absence of viable sperm. Diagnosis, sterile. The word just sat there on the screen, mocking me. He wasn't just a cheater, he was a monster who had let me believe I was the problem for an entire year. But if he could lie about something that huge, what else was he hiding? That question became my obsession. I remembered the day he supposedly paid for those expensive fertility tests. He'd claimed they cost thousands of dollars, but when I checked our bank statements, there was no payment to any medical facility. What I did find was a massive cash withdrawal, $25,000. My stomach dropped. This wasn't just about an affair anymore. I hired a private investigator the next day. He looked more like a college professor than a detective, which was perfect. I don't care about the affair, I told him, sliding a folder across his desk. I already know about that. I need you to follow the money trail. 2 weeks later, he delivered results that exceeded my worst nightmares. The money had gone to a secret account that David had been using to fund Hannah's entire lifestyle. Her rent, her car payments, her designer shopping sprees, all of it paid for with our money. But the final piece was absolutely devastating. David had embezzled $200,000 from his company's expense account and used it as a down payment on a house. A house that was now registered in my mother's name. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was a full-scale conspiracy involving my husband, my sister, and my own mother. They'd been planning this for months, maybe years. So there I was, back at that birthday dinner, with 2 pieces of paper in my purse that would destroy their entire world. After Hannah's announcement, I stood up calmly and raised my glass. To family, I said, my voice carrying across the silent restaurant. And to the truth. I reached into my purse and pulled out the first document. I slid it across the table to David, who looked at it with growing confusion. "What is this?" he asked, his voice starting to shake. "That," I said, making sure everyone could hear me, "is your real medical report from Riverside Medical Center, from last year." I watched the color drain from his face. He knew exactly what it meant. Hannah looked back and forth between us, her triumphant expression finally starting to crack. "The biggest lie wasn't sleeping with my sister David," I continued, my voice cutting through the silence like a blade. "It was pretending you could ever be anyone's father." The entire room gasped. Hannah's face went from glowing victory to pure horror as she looked down at her stomach, the reality of my words hitting her like a freight train. David started stammering, "You can't. This isn't." But I wasn't finished. I turned to my mother, who was staring at me with her mouth hanging open. "And Mom," I said, my voice getting even more dangerous, "that beautiful new house you're living in, when David's company finishes investigating the missing $200,000, they're going to want it back." That was the knockout punch. Complete chaos erupted. David lunged across the table, screaming at me, his face twisted with rage and panic. Restaurant security had to drag him away while he thrashed and cursed. In the middle of all the madness, as my mother started sobbing and Hannah just sat there in shock, I calmly picked up my purse. Rachel was already by my side, ready to get me out of there. As I started to leave, Hannah grabbed my arm desperately. "Sarah, please," she whimpered. I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back into her terrified eyes. I pulled away gently, and my final words to her weren't angry, they were just final. "Save your pleading," I said flatly, "and call Ryan." He deserves to know he's about to become a father. Then I walked out of that restaurant with Rachel, the heavy doors closing behind me on the life I was leaving behind. For the first time in years, I could actually breathe. The next 6 months were a whirlwind of lawyers and paperwork, but it was worth every minute. I'm sitting in my art studio now, 6 months later, my hands covered in paint, laughing with Rachel as she tries to figure out how to use a pottery wheel. "So the divorce is completely final?" she asks, flicking some clay at me. "As of yesterday," I say, grinning. "His company settled generously. Turns out they really don't like having their dirty laundry aired in public court cases." My phone buzzes on the table. I wipe my hands and check it. It's a news alert. The headline reads, "Former corporate executive David Martinez sentenced to 6 years for embezzlement." There's a grainy photo of him being led away in handcuffs. I stare at it for a moment and feel nothing. No satisfaction, no anger, just quiet closure. He's a chapter in a book I've already finished reading. I put the phone down and turn back to my pottery wheel. "Now," I say to Rachel, spinning the wheel again, "where were we?" I have a small balcony in my new apartment that overlooks the river. On it, I have a single orchid that I rescued from the clearance section of a garden store. It was beaten up and all its flowers had fallen off, but I could see the life still in it. I've been nursing it back to health for months now. This morning, I noticed a new bud forming. For the longest time, I thought I was the one who was broken, the one who couldn't grow, but I wasn't broken. I was just planted in the wrong garden. Thanks for listening to my story. It took a long time to heal, and honestly, I'm still figuring things out day by day. But I want to ask you something. Have you ever had a moment that felt like the end of the world, but turned out to be a new beginning? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love hearing from you all. If this story touched you in any way, smash that like button and hit subscribe for more real-life stories that prove sometimes the quiet ones are the most dangerous. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.